All right. Well, I'll tell you about my latest case,
Sure.
actually. There's a local elderly woman who lives in the next town over from me. She was starting to experience various symptoms. It included headaches, earaches, unexplained anxiety. She wasn't typically an anxious person. She was having
Mhm.
some sleeplessness and something called scopistasia. That's the feeling of being watched. So
Okay.
she wanted to remain somewhat anonymous because of the stigma. People we're in a outback where we live up here in the mountains of New Hampshire, so it's kind of a I don't want to say reserved, but people tend to a little more on the down low with this sort of thing
Sure.
when it's involving them. Not that there aren't haunted places everywhere around here. There's a lot of history around here. But anyway, so she reached out to a couple ghost hunting teams from out of town. And, they were the type of teams that kind of just followed what they saw on television, not a lot of experience. They did some consulting with her and pretty much found 8,000 reasons why the place was haunted, not really getting into any of the science behind it, which is what I do.
Okay.
She wasn't convinced. She thought maybe there was more to it. And so she reached out on a local Facebook page, actually asking if there was someone in the region that, had a little more of a scientific mind with this. Some people were suggested there's a ghost hunting team in town, but they would have fallen into that same category.
Mhm.
First team that consulted her. So some people suggested me, and they put me in contact with her. And honestly, I didn't even need to go there to figure out what was going on. I conducted an interview with her, and what really cued me in is when she mentioned that she was having ear pain and headaches. So I just got to know her a little bit for a couple minutes, and then I started asking questions pertaining to infrasound. What infrasound is are sound frequencies below 20 hertz. Humans can hear, typically the range is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Some humans can hear down to 17 to 18 hertz, but it's not common. The human eye resonates at 18 hertz, which I'll get into in a moment.
Okay.
So I started asking her various questions. What can cause infrasound is things with spinning motors, dryers, fans, generators, any type of motor, basically. Natural forms will actually come from tectonic plates, volcanoes, thunder. And another form of thunder is Schumann resonances. That's a whole different thing to get into. Yeah, some animals use infrasound for contacting in large packs, like elephants or rhinoceros. The sound can actually
Really?
travel. Yeah, it can actually travel hundreds of miles. These large packs that are traveling will actually use this. So anyway, I started asking her, I'm like, do you happen to, have a diesel generator? Because a lot of houses up here in the woods have generators.
Mhm.
And she goes, no, no, I'm on the grid and I don't have a generator. I says, well, do you happen to have an old dryer? And she goes, no, no, no. I actually live in a condo. I use a local laundromat. And I says, "Do you happen to have an old metallic fan?" And she stops and she's like, "Actually, yes, I do." She says, "I use this old metallic fan because in her condo the air circulation isn't very good. So she
Mhm.
keeps it near some of the heat vents so it blows heat and across a larger room. And in the summer the same thing with the air conditioning." And I said, "Well, has this thing started sounding a little awkward lately? Is there any type of grinding noise or like it's having a little difficulty?" And she's like, "Yeah, actually, it has." And I suggested that this was creating a level of infrasound and that she may be sensitive to this. I said, let's do an experiment. Let's turn off the fan or replace it. Because large fans aren't overly expensive, and if up here, if she owns a condo, she's got some money. But that wouldn't exactly explain the scopistasia, the feeling of being watched. So I dug a little deeper into that. And so I started asking questions related to whether she had been doing some remodeling in the house and whatnot. She goes, "No, I haven't done any remodeling." I says, "Well, have you been, any of the rooms that you're used to the look of? Is there any difference? Have you been moving some stuff around? Have you been cleaning out closets or packing?" She goes, "Actually, yeah, I have a big walk-in closet that I've been cleaning out that, for the past couple weeks." She goes, "I have boxes stacked everywhere in my bedroom." I says, "Well, are you familiar with something called claustrophobia?" the fear, the fear of enclosed spaces.
Mhm.
And I felt by having these stacks of boxes around, it had changed the atmosphere in her smaller bedroom. It's a small condo, and it changes the light patterns. And she goes, actually, come to think of it, I'm feeling this when I'm going to bed at night. It says, well, over the next couple days, if you can, lower the levels of the boxes or get them back in the closet because I feel that it might be acute claustrophobia, not scopistasia, from a paranormal entity. So over the next couple days, she replaced the fan and she cleaned up the room. And sure enough, we heard back from her a couple days later that all the symptoms from headaches to ear pain to the feeling of being watched, the anxiety, sleeplessness, all disappeared. And it turns out where, some ghost hunters convinced her that her place was, try to convince her her place was haunted. It was just infrasound and acute claustrophobia.